Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're opening up a theological cold case. We are launching a forensic investigation into 3 ancient Arabian goddesses to figure out exactly how a brilliant rhetorical strategy was used to establish absolute monotheism. We're going to look way past the surface-level narratives, dig right into the hard archaeology, and analyze the textual dossier to reconstruct a totally lost world.
Okay, so to crack this historical mystery, we'll be moving through 5 steps. We're starting with the accusation, unearthing the real goddesses, understanding their roles as mothers, guardians, and intercessors, then breaking down the Quran's polemical framing, and finally, looking at the ultimate battle for authority. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The accusation. We're starting off with a massive historical and textual tension surrounding 3 ancient deities, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat.
Now, the Quran comes out swinging. It sharply criticizes people for assigning these specific goddesses as literal daughters to God. But as historians, we gotta ask a really critical question here. Was this an actual literal doctrine? Like, did the pre-Islamic Arabs actually have some standardized theology that said these 3 were literal offspring of a supreme creator? Or was this actually a highly effective rhetorical reframing by a new monotheistic movement?
To make sense of this, we really need to understand something called polemical framing. It's basically a rhetorical strategy, and it was used all the time in religious debates across late antiquity. Whether you're talking about Jewish polemics, Christian heresiology, or Zoroastrian disputes, debaters would regularly take their opponent's super complex, kind of diffuse beliefs and simplify them into a really clear, attackable doctrinal target. We're going to investigate if that's exactly what went down in ancient Arabia.
Moving on to Section 2, Unearthing the Real Goddesses. Let's look at the hard material evidence, because the archaeology completely shatters the popular visual myth of crude, isolated idol worship.
When most of us hear the word idols, we instantly picture these primitive, human-shaped statues, right? Well, actually, the primary cultic representations of these figures were often totally abstract. You have to look at the Baetyl. Take the minimalist eye Baetyl of Al-Uzza found in Petra. It's literally just a standing rectangular block of limestone with 2 abstract eyes and a nose. The idea was that the divine is just too vast for human likeness, so they used these pure, geometric stone blocks as cosmic placeholders.
And here's the really crazy part. These deities were actual globalized powerhouses. They were totally plugged into the Greco-Roman imperial cults and massive international trade networks. Al-Lat, for instance, was actually carved in the likeness of the Greek goddess Athena up in Palmyra, and Al-Uzza and Al-Lat are both listed as the brides of Dushara in Nabatean inscriptions. These definitely weren't just isolated local idols. They were intensely modern global symbols recognized all the way from the Mediterranean straight down to the Red Sea.
All right, Section 3, Mothers, Guardians, and Intercessors. So what did these figures actually do all day before the rise of Islam?
Well, they weren't just abstract ideas. They were baked into the very infrastructure of everyday life, law, and survival. Take Manat. Often associated with fate and time, she was far from just a concept. Look at this legal funerary inscription from the Hegra tombs. It proves Manat was an active, terrifying cosmic enforcer along the ancient highway. If you robbed a grave, you weren't just breaking local law, you were triggering a literal cosmic curse from Manat herself. No way you'd risk that.
Then there's Alet. We have this stunning 1st century artifact, the Lion of Alet, which actually depicts a giant lion protecting a fragile gazelle between its paws. It explicitly proves these goddesses were the guardians of peace. To destroy them wasn't just some religious shift, it meant completely dismantling the existing legal and ethical code of Arabia. They were the guarantors of safe sanctuaries in a really harsh environment.
So here is the absolute crux of the matter. We know for sure they were powerful regional figures with enormous influence. But the historical epigraphy, it yields literally 0 inscriptions of Arabs explicitly calling them the daughters of Allah. We have immense evidence of their worship, but the strongest claim that pre-Islamic Arabs had a literal divine daughters theology lacks direct contemporary proof in the stone records.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Quran's polemical framing. This is the motive and the weapon. If they weren't literally considered daughters by their worshippers, why does the text frame them that way?
Guys, this is a straight-up linguistic chess match. Look at the older Nabatean inscriptions. They frequently give figures like Al-Lat the title Mothers of the Gods. Now, a mother deity has autonomous, independent authority, but the Quran, it never calls them mothers. It insists they are daughters and mere names.
By shifting their title from autonomous mothers to subordinate daughters who rely on a patriarch, the text rhetorically demotes their authority before it even bothers to deny their existence. It's a calculated, totally brilliant linguistic demotion.
And then, the text deploys this absolutely brilliant rhetorical irony. It exposes the social hypocrisy of a heavily patriarchal society that culturally devalued human daughters, yet somehow assigned them to God. It's essentially arguing, wait, you prefer sons for yourselves, but you're giving daughters to the divine? It's not just a theological critique, it's a devastating social and moral exposure of the audience's own prejudices.
So, how does this all climax? Academic historians look at the famous satanic verses, or the Quranic incident, not as some theological lapse, but as the historical memory of a massive, real-world negotiation. The Meccans were actually seemingly willing to accept Allah as supreme. They offered a compromise to keep the goddesses as interceding cranes who could just ferry prayers up to God. But the Quran ultimately rejects this shared authority entirely. Absolute monotheism is established exactly at the moment when all those intermediaries are permanently removed.
Finally, Section 5, the battle for authority. Let's pull all our forensic findings together and deliver the final verdict on what this ancient conflict was really about.
Because ultimately, this wasn't just some primitive battle of polytheism versus monotheism. Early Islam was stepping into a super complex late antique world, full of saints, angels, and heavenly mediators. Allah may have already been acknowledged as the supreme creator by plenty of people in Arabia. The true paradigm shift wasn't just introducing God, it was the total removal of these sacred intermediaries. It was a highly sophisticated debate about whether you need a guardian, a mother, or an intercessor to speak to the divine, or if you, the believer, have direct, unmediated access.
And that leaves us with a massive cliffhanger for our next explainer. If these deities were globally connected powerhouses tied to Greco-Roman trade, and not just local tribal idols, what does that mean for their home in Mecca? Was the Kaaba just an unruly pagan museum, or was it a highly regulated, tax-free international marketplace designed to bind an entire empire together? We're going to strip away the layers of the ancient Kaaba next time. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and remember, keep questioning the history you think you know.